this video, I thought it'd be good to go through my full year return on my 25k stocks and shares ISA portfolio on Vanguard. This is an account that I've been building for a little over 4 years, and in December of 2024, my investments were worth exactly £24,992. And since then, I haven't invested anything into this account or withdrawn any money. So in this video, I'll be sharing what I invested the 25k in, what fees or charges I've paid over the past year to keep that money invested, how much my investments are worth now, and I'll also update you with the minor changes I've made to my portfolio, which I think will make a difference to this account here on out. As always, please note that I'm not a financial advisor and this is not financial advice. First and foremost then, the question of what did I invest in? The portfolio has a few different funds, all of which are Vanguard funds, and I believe most of them are exclusive to the Vanguard platform. The most interesting thing to look at is maybe the geographical split of this portfolio. My investment style is very much that I like to try and buy the world, and over time this portfolio grew to incorporate my different preferences with investing. But by and large, this portfolio is very similar to a global index fund or ETF, with a few small nuances. So the first nuance being that it's actually a little bit overrepresenting America, and it's also very overrepresenting the UK. This wasn't intentional, by the way, it was just what came to be as I started to invest in different things. But I also think that this is a little bit of a quirk of Vanguard, perhaps, that they do lean a little bit more towards UK in some of their funds. This portfolio is also mostly stocks, I should say that, but there is an element of bonds in there, and in total this makes up around 14% of the holdings in this portfolio. So next up we'll talk about what fees or charges I paid to Vanguard for the pleasure of investing with them. Overall, during that 12-month period, I paid Vanguard £41.97 to hold my investments for me. That is their account fee, which actually did increase at the start of 2025. And what they did was they kind of introduced a flat minimum fee of £4 a month. And what that meant was that anybody with less than £32,000 invested proportionally were paying more. For everyone with more than that amount, it didn't hit them so hard because it just then equates to a 0.15% fee. But for people like me, you know, we were kind of part of the way through growing our pots, so it didn't feel like too big of a hit, but nevertheless it did mean that the amount I was paying on a monthly basis did increase. And this is where I would caveat for new investors: if you are brand new and you're not looking to build your pot up to that sort of size very quickly, then I would be cautious about selecting Vanguard, because with that minimum payment, if you only had £100 invested, you would be paying far too much proportionally in fees for it to be worth it for you. And so Vanguard, as with all of the platforms, has their pros, has their cons, but as an entry-level platform, it can be very expensive. There's also fund charges, and that is something that you don't necessarily see on the account because it's built into the funds. So just because it isn't listed here does not mean that they weren't paid up. The total amount of those charges came to £50.45, and once the account and fund charges have been added together, that means I paid about £92 in total for the year to sort of maintain and keep this portfolio invested and growing with the stock market. I personally think that that is decent value for money. There are new providers that have come on the scene more recently that offer a very tempting no account fee whatsoever, and I did do a similar portfolio update recently where I invested £20,000 and it cost me a lot less. So if I were to have 25k invested now in a globally diversified ETF on another platform, or maybe an index fund, that might only cost me £30. So this, by comparison, is actually 3 times the amount for fees. However, there are going to be slight variations in what you can invest in on the individual platforms, and they all come with their own little quirks, guys. So you've got to weigh up the risk and the reward and what works for you and your investment style and strategy and preferences. But to move on to the juicy bit, how much is the portfolio worth now? So after 12 months, that £24,992 that I quoted earlier ended up being worth around £27,179, and that's an increase of 2,187 or 8.7%. And this means it averages out to around £182 per month in passive gains. Although if you've actually had any experience with investing, then you'll know that that certainly wasn't a straight line. I'll put the month by month change on screen to explain this out a little bit. But if we look at the personal investments returns column, you can see that 7 months out of 12, the portfolio went up in value, and 5 months, it was actually down in value. The year progresses from bottom to top on this table, with a sizable dip apparent in March and then continuing into April. That was the low point of the year, and that is where you could see my portfolio was actually down over £2,000. However, the longer that I've been investing, the more I've come to realise that that is just to be expected, because the stock market is forever and always going to be volatile. You just have to have the faith that in the long term, after waiting it out, it will go upwards. Something that I like to always come back to is the fact that year over year, if we look at the historical performance of the global stock market, it tends to do about 10% per year on average. The other side of it is to think about the typical recommendation is that you only invest if you've got at least 5 years in mind that you can go without that money. And this is because in the event of a crash, you want to be able to wait out the recovery. The stock market has always recovered, which gives it good precedent to be worth the risk. But in the worst of cases, it has taken 10 or even 20 years to recover. So whatever you do, you don't really want to have to consolidate a loss by selling purely because you're in a poor financial situation and you need that money now. I'll now go into my Vanguard account changes for this year, and to be honest, I haven't changed an awful lot. So the things that I'm invested in right now have not changed, but the thing that I wanted to talk to you about were those account fees. And you might have noticed, but those amounts actually came out of the funds themselves and the holdings on my portfolio. And I didn't know this previously, but somebody pointed out in one of my previous videos about being able to change the setup of your Vanguard account so that those fees actually come out of a bank account rather than your Vanguard account. And the benefit of this that I can see is quite similar to why I choose to invest in accumulating funds, because I can keep the maximum amount invested in my portfolio. It also means that if at any point I'm maxing out my ISA allowance, I don't end up selling off some of those precious holdings in order to cover off the account fee. So I went into those settings, I changed that, and from here on out, the £50 or so annual account fee is going to be coming from my personal bank account. But I'm pretty happy with that, because over the long term, that pot will grow to be even larger, because we're not chipping away and having to sell off those funds unnecessarily. The other really important change that I did make is to update my password, because I realised that I'd made my account many moons ago many years ago. I don't think Vanguard really prompt you to do this, or at least they didn't prompt me to do so, and the criteria when I added that password originally was pretty low, so maybe something to have a look into if you've had a Vanguard account for some time now. Overall, however, I am really happy with this performance. I broke the performance down by individual funds as well, where the annual performance sits between 7 on kind of the worst performing fund and 11% on the best performing fund after fees. Let me know if there's anything else you want me to cover in future content, and otherwise I will see you in the next one.